Queen. Which could Yeah, okay. So hello once again, everyone. Welcome to the second part of today's conference. We are still waiting for some of our participants to join us from the panel session. The panel sessions have been quite fruitful and made a lot of discussions. That's why, as you can see, they're not done in 2 hours time. So all our colleagues should join us in 10 minutes. So before we start our third plenary session, and I like to thank our guests for joining us. We will play the multimedia document that we we prepared the Hacking for Defense educational program and innovative solutions for defense. Okay, we'll display that clip for all our physical and online participants, and then we'll follow with the presentation.
I'm Brian, from Act for Impact organization. I would like to address you a question. Do you encounter daily defense problems in your professional activity that you really want to solve? Problems which become your Chinese drop and create daily discomfort? But you hesitate to address them because, first, you know that it takes a long time to identify a solution and, secondly, you know it will incur high costs, specific for defense and security field. However, like other security and defense leaders, you have often looked at the business environment and wonder how could they succeed in relatively short time to identify cost-effective innovative solutions, brought immediately to the market. How do they do it? Agile, innovative, and effervescent companies have common characteristics, are focused on solving problems, having the capacity to communicate effectively and engage interdisciplinary teams, applying new solutions to old problems. Can we apply the same pattern to defense problems? Definitely yes. All over the world, actors are looking for innovative solutions for defense, and ways in which this goal is reached, embody extremely creative forms. Given today's globalized access to knowledge and the rapid pace of technology development, innovation, speed, and agility have reached a greater importance. In recent years, NATO has stepped up its work on emerging and disruptive technologies, including by adopting an implementation strategy to ensure NATO's edge in 7 key disruptive technologies: artificial intelligence, data and computing, autonomy, quantum-enabled technologies, IoT technology, hypersonic technology, and space. It is clear, this is the trend. And, in order to keep up with the evolutions in the field of defense resources, each state needs the know-how necessary to obtain fast and low-cost solutions, made by the domestic communities. Do you want to know how you can find quick and cost-effective solutions, using innovative cutting-edge technologies, for the problems you face, even if they are specific to the security and defense areas? Using Lean Launchpad methodology, developed in 2011 by Steve Blanks and a team from Stanford University, over 359 defense problems have been addressed in the last 10 years. More than 31 universities, 66 companies, and more than 25 defense beneficiaries have been involved in Lean Launchpad programs. Successful stories are countering asymmetric drone activities, or personnel signature reduction, and many others. The methodology brings together actors from defense, business, and academia. During a 10-week sprint, each interdisciplinary team chooses and addresses one of the issues listed by beneficiaries. All activities involve the whole team and support from the chosen defense partner. Each team is assisted by 2 mentors, one being mandatory from the defense sector. Thus, mentors, students, teachers, business experts and military experts subscribe to an entrepreneurial and agile working path, based on the Lean Launchpad methodology. They fast test innovative hypotheses and solutions, in real time. Following these discussions, the hypotheses are continuous adjusted and viable prototypes are built in order to solve security and defense problems. Teams can then access financing to shift the solution into both commercial and defense product. The whole approach is centered around a mission model canvas dashboard. Key partners, key activities, key resources, value proposition, budget, support, beneficiaries, deployment and success factors are defined. This process is different from the ones where, first, the technological solutions are developed, and then, the problems that can be solved are identified. The working principles are: statement of a hypothetical operational model that frame the beneficiary's real needs and problems. Defining the operational model main elements, mission, partners, resources, processes, main actors. Fast hypotheses testing through multiple conversations and interviews. Using an agile design and development method to build a prototype based on users' feedback. Create a minimum viable product to test its real value for beneficiaries. It is important to be aware that, being a greenfield, early seeds project, the success rates from the idea to MVP are around 1 from 5. May I implement Lean Launchpad in my country or in the team I lead? Yes, of course. Contact Act for Impact and, under their guidance, after a TUT training that lasts between 3 and 5 days, you will solve your problems with a team of experts ready to run Lean Launchpad programs. Of course, the first programs can be assisted and supervised by the A4I team, a team with specialists who attended specific Stanford and BMNT seminars and gained strong practical experience. What's next? Contact us. Thank you.
Hello, sir. And I think I don't, is good morning a proper term to use? So I'll say good morning if it's okay. And so we are going to begin our second plenary session. We have a general topic on prioritizing investments in defense industry, identifying and assessing emerging technologies and scientific discoveries with disruptive impact on defense, as well as our topic of the Black Sea strategic game and what is happening in the area. For this, allow me to introduce our first keynote speaker from this plenary session. David Redder is a Deputy Director in the Office of Foreign Investment Review with focus on national economic security, foreign direct investment, trade and industrial policies, and matters under the purview of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States of America. He leads daily engagements regarding macroeconomic modeling, supply chain risk management, incentivizing technology development, industrial policy decision-making, and navigating legal or financial issues with senior government officials, Fortune 500 leaders, middle market business executives, finance professionals, and law firm partners. Mr. Rader, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you so very much. It's great to be here. I'm just doing a quick combo check to make sure everybody can hear me. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully it's displaying properly. It appears to be. I'll flip through these slides. Slideshow mode. There we go. Great. Yep, so David Rader, I'm a GS-15 in the Department of Defense in the Office of Foreign Investment Review. Half of my portfolio is CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, and then the other half is on the economic competition, emerging technology space to a degree. So I'll go through these quickly so we can turn to the other segments and have a meaningful discussion. The slides are not as interesting as the discussion that follows. Apologies. So what we're going to talk, well, I'm going to address a little bit today is the threats and risks to the defense industrial base, which is how we describe it in the US. That includes innovation ecosystems, as well as our financial structures and postures around that. Chinese tactics used to exploit US critical technology, as well as our allies and partners, and then some of the different investments and sources of innovation that we use in the US innovation ecosystem. So framing this for the threats and risks within the CFIUS construct, we have transactional, human, and cyber. And if you look at the crosswalk there, that parallel the DIB, Defense Industrial Base, academia, and financial. Originally, the committee and specifically my office were just looking at transactions. And it took us a while, I think, historically, to recognize all the various ways or the large and growing attack surface in which our adversaries use to either gain access to critical technologies or steal them outright, as well as through our both legal and structured means. So as you'll see here kind of in the bottom, so I got to click out of a box that's in the way there. Adversarial capital is used to gain control over a firm's decision-making. That can be through what we call FOCI, ownership, control, influence, or foreign ownership, control, or influence. And so that original posture we had was that if you own a company 51% or whatever, then you would have access and control to it. What we realized over time is there's many ways to access that and have control over a company, including board seats, including joint ventures, including even if you have a large customer base in one country, if 80% of your clients come from one place and they say, hey, we're gonna stop doing business with you unless you share, your information with us, and you lose 80% of your revenue overnight, that's ostensibly controlling your company, or at least to a certain degree. And so these are some of the things we look at in the department, as well as writ large in the U.S. government with our State Department, Commerce, and U.S. trade rep colleagues. I'm going to try to talk slower. I talk fast by nature. And then here in the second segment here, you'll see investments, M&A, dual loyalties, or the talent programs. I'm not going to get into the 1,000 Talents program, but it's one that's front of mind for me for certain, as well as joint ventures and espionage. I'm going to kind of again cruise through these. So this is the threat, the attack surface that we see it. And so when I make this presentation, whether it's to executives or whether it's to intelligence officers or whether it's to allies and partners like all of yourself here, my Romanian and British colleagues are here today, as well as many others. We'll make sure that people understand that, if you close a door, you still might have a window open. Companies will say, hey, we don't have any M&A with an adversary or even with an intermediary. We think we're good. And you say, well, where's your chief technology officer come from? And I say, well, yeah, he might be from somewhere else. And so we try to explain the multitude of ways in which somebody can try to either reach critical technology, mirror it, or extract it. And so you'll see on the right there, Chinese specifically, and they're not the only ones who do it, but I am going to focus on them. They work very hard to circumvent and skirt our regulatory infrastructure, as well as use our laws against us. And they do that to our allies and partners around the world. And that has quite a negative impact on both economies, innovation ecosystems, tax base, as well as how you're able to deliver across the board of your defense supply systems, your supply chains, and into your marketplace. So the way I view it, especially for a lot of companies, is they think, hey, listen, I make a widget. I don't sell to the DoD. I don't sell to the Ministry of Defense. I'm not involved in this game. But they need to realize they actually might be. Made in China 2025 is China, the PRC, CCP, CPC, whichever acronym you want to use to describe the Chinese state government. That's how they focus their, a lot of their, I don't want to say defense industrial base because that's our word, but their military civil fusion, the way in which they operate, the PLA, the plan, and the commercial entities that feed into that, as well as the direct suppliers. And so somebody might make a widget that later gets glued into a bigger product. And that's what China is going after. And so I'll talk about that later, but I want to frame that as not only do you have to look at a bottom up of which widgets get built into later products and finished goods or intermediary products, but also how China is looking at you downward and what they're trying to extract and pull into their indigenous innovation and indigenous production capabilities. Military civil fusion is a term that's been around for a while, actually, but it's placed great emphasis on it because we started to see the role of state-owned enterprises, SOEs, increase significantly in feeding CCP or CPC directed objectives through commercial enterprises. And so again, that is expanding the battlefield into the economic battlefield into pure commercial plays, which historically we did not play a role in this, namely in emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, hypersonics, energy, you name it. Some things that went from science project all the way to now where it has a national security nexus. And then lastly, as individuals are susceptible, if not actually beholden to Chinese national security laws. People might say, well, I'm not doing business in China or with a Chinese company, or they don't have a role here in Romania, but the individual that might be working for you, might be partnered with you, or might be a researcher, is actually beholden to Chinese national security laws. And you have to understand that at any time they can be called into to facilitate a greater objective than what might be in front of you. So, full stop, the US government fully supports foreign direct investment. It's a great thing. The global economy is a better one. It's more accessible. It's more inclusive because of foreign direct investment. And so I'm not here to bash that. I actually fully support it. I was a former investment banker, but I will say that there is that fine line where it crosses over into the adversarial exploitation side, which is what I'm here to talk about, especially as it affects our allies and partners as they look at their own domestic innovation bases, defense industrial bases, and innovation ecosystems. So these are just some of the numbers here that kind of frame, FDI in the United States. Again, I obviously have a very significant focus here on my country, but I'm hoping to frame this so everybody starts to think about their role in global power competition or integrated deterrence, as well as your own domestic protection systems. So China's investment in a lot of ways does distort market forces. It plays a significant role in the movement of free flow of capital, ideas, goods, and people. But also, again, as I mentioned, there's some exploitation sides to it that are quite problematic for us. So I'm going to, again, kind of cruise through these quickly. Some of the other focus areas we do are strictly with, Chinese VC investments, and then overall percent changes in VC targeted sectors. And you'll see there at the bottom, a lot of those emerging sectors, biotechnology or life sciences, have seen a significant uptick. I wouldn't give it hockey stick growth, but it's trending that way. It's where we can see a concentrated and focused effort into those sectors, so China can play a bigger role. So that's so my ally, I highlight that so allies and partners around the world can be thoughtful of trend lines and where we think there will be pushes in place, as well as where there's great economic opportunity for allies and partners too, and commercial enterprises around the world. Again, so Chinese IP theft, if you look at that right column, emerging technologies, it's a little vague because quantum computing, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does AI look like? How do you tie it to military nexus versus a commercial? And that's something that a lot of people, both in the commercial industry and in government, are having a hard time doing. And so it's important we have strong collaboration, both with the private sector and with our international partners and within our own US government community to make sure we've properly scoped how this all comes together and what this means for us. And then our traditional industries. So on the committee, the FIRMA, the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act of 2018, expanded the scope of transactions that we look at, including real estate and including personal data. And so those are important for us now to start paying attention to how they fit in, again, to China's big 2025 objectives, as well as writ large. And then in the bottom bullet there, some estimate the annual cost of IP theft between 225 and 600 billion. So a big range, I get that. It's on the 3X there on the left end parameters. On the conservative side, I think it's about actual IP, and on the more liberal side of it, it includes tax revenue loss. It includes what happens when industries shutter and people move out of districts and what that looks like for them. So again, I'm going to keep squeezing through these. So this isn't a theoretical. This isn't me bashing China or adversaries writ large. This has happened in practice quite extensively. If you type in the word, technology theft plus US, you'll see a litany of cases, and same with Europe. There was, I think, a Wall Street Journal article said over 750 commercial enterprises in Europe have been bought by Chinese state-owned enterprises. This was in like 2019 or 2020. And so people need to be aware of, these are, again, this is kind of a panacea here of different technology transfer scenarios and incidents we've had. And it goes back to my point of, if you look at T-Mobile or if you look at Avago, people might not understand how they play into defense ecosystems or national security infrastructure. because they're like, well, I make a communication platform, but they need to understand that that also ultimately feeds into our grand strategies and national security strategies or Chinese strategies. So these are the kind of slides that hopefully they can pass along. These are publicly cleared slides that we like to share with allies and partners because it's a lot of reading and a lot to go through. And again, I want to get to the conversation where I find more value. So we highlight this as two scenarios, again, getting back to like a lithium ion battery company, high density lithium ion. They might make it for electric vehicles and smartphones. They might have gotten SBIR, a small business innovation research funding. That's a US government innovation fund. They might form a joint venture with a partner thinking, hey, we're going to have great market access. And ultimately then that technology would get transferred, replicated there. Those companies sometimes, and quite often, as I'm about to show you, get removed from the marketplace later at great cost to themselves. So I highlight that so companies as well as defense managers, as well as government officials are aware that small businesses, it's not about, half of it's about serving your country and doing the right thing and playing the role, to benefit your nation. But the other half is there's actually a business case to be made about being very protective of your technologies for the longevity of your business and your overall commercial viability. So perfect example is Huawei. Huawei, you can type in, it's open source again, Huawei plus IP theft or any of the lawsuits ongoing. And I say that to say, a lot of technologies that Huawei went after, such as a modem, which is a commercially off-the-shelf product. You can buy it on Amazon or at Target, wherever you want to buy it. I don't think people realize that their modem was going to be acquired through a joint venture or stolen by Huawei to build a completely vertically integrated system, which in large part is an intelligence gathering platform. Yes, it will help you gather or download your video faster, but it plays into a bigger role there in Huawei's intelligence gathering pursuits. And so that joint venture or that that relationship that companies had with Huawei, they didn't realize that they were getting, they were like, oh, we're selling to Huawei. This is great. We're going to expand our market. Huawei was replicating that, cutting them out. Then eventually they were being removed from marketplaces around the world. And so that math word problem of would you rather have $1 million in 30 years or 1 cent that doubles every day for 30 years? Well, that 1 cent doubling every day is actually worth $5.36 million. So obviously you'd want that. So when companies or partners are looking at that money up front, they need to think about the loss that comes on the back end if they are removed from a vertically integrated stack like this, like we see with Huawei. So CFIUS itself, the Committee on Foreign Investment, like I said, it's an interagency committee. It's chaired by the Department of Treasury. The Department of Defense, we're the largest stakeholder. We have a 45-day review period, then we have an additional 45-day investigation period. And this is for a transaction where we think it poses a national security threat. We can choose to block the transaction, mitigate it, or approve the transaction, granting safe harbor with the opportunity to review later should there be a material change to it. There's a lot online, good material about this you can find. So for every CFIUS case, we do a risk-based analysis. And so we identify the risk, and like I said, clear, mitigate, or prohibit, or I use the term block. And then we have to be able to mitigate it and effectively monitor it. And in this process, our job is to ultimately assure economic growth and innovation are preserved, but national security primarily is defended and protected. Then also on the innovation side, so we view it as having two significant valleys of death. So you have that back of envelope here, and I guess for you all it's on the left. So you have, that one product a year, LRIP is what we call it, low rate initial production. And then there's that valley of death, that low one where they haven't gotten to the point yet where they can scale and make market sizing to get to maybe a price parity or a competitive advantage in the marketplace to get that first tranche of funding from a venture partner or from the US government. And then, you'll have that uptick where it seems to be, okay, money's coming in, but how do you go from one widget to 10,000 and 10,000 to 10 million? So you have economies of scale and you can have a huge end user base that ultimately you're trying to ramp up. And so US government and our commercial partners, we're working together to bridge these valleys. And so I asked this of my allies and partners to think about their innovation ecosystems and what it looks like if they're seeing the same trend lines, how you all work to bridge those valleys. So you're not making it beholden to the US government or your government specifically to get a product through from start to finish, but also so it's commercially viable along the way, and that it has that commercial benefit, because government doesn't have a monopoly on good ideas, and we need our commercial partners both on the innovation side and the finance side to be involved in this. So my last comment here, then I'll turn it back over, is what companies can do. Normally, again, this is focused on the C-suite or investment bankers. Scrutinizing ultimate beneficial owner is critical. When companies are partnering, or they think, hey, we have a great opportunity here with the Chinese or the Russians or whomever, they need to make sure that also that's not being filtered through a fund in, pick a country, whatever. Pick on our I saw a British friend here, so I'm gonna pick on the Brits here, but there's not a fund in England that's buying the company, but the ultimate owner might actually be beholden to the Chinese. And so companies need to incorporate a better due diligence practice. Governments do. One of the big things too, and I'm not a cyber guy, I won't pretend to be, red cell capabilities, monitoring. There's been a lot of cyber hacks lately that I think have brought awareness to this issue. I've raised awareness that a lot of companies have neglected over time, because it's not a fun area to spend money. When you look at that profit and loss line, this isn't a primary focus, but it's something that needs to be. As well as an intellectual property, especially if they make a critical system, or if the company's in stealth mode before they go public. Air gapping that technology, IT separation, and making sure you have the right people in the right room, as well as protecting data rooms. Data rooms are one of the great leakage points there. Wittingly and unwittingly, partners share information because they want to, hey, this is the great stuff we're doing, we want to be funded, but they don't realize that's how a lot of things get out the door too. So I'm going to end my slideshow there. I'm going to turn it back over. Sorry, there we go. Share. And I'll turn it back for conversation. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Quite a lot. Very interesting and hot topics that you put on the slide. I don't see any online questions, but that's not an issue, because this field of defense investments and defense economics is my piece of cake, and I have quite a lot of questions to follow on. So I especially like this topic and the way you presented it. So first of all, you talked about an interesting subject called military-civilian fusion. You said that it drives international acquisition of technologies, which can then be weaponized. I was wondering if you could develop a little bit more on that, especially, I don't know if this military-civilian fusion can be put in the context of what we have seen recently with the AUKUS agreement between Australia, US, and UK, with this change in paradigm for Australia, who has started buying defense equipment from the US instead of France, which of course made a lot of let's say controversies in the European Union. The European Union countries are also looking for something similar in terms of expanding their defense industries without actually signaling that they're becoming protectionists while doing so. So this would be my first question, if you could develop a little bit more on this military-civilian fusion.
Yeah, so I'm going to stay away from the AUKUS comments because I'm not the right guy for that. But I will talk about military-civil fusion happily. So for example, in the United States and allies and partners around the world too, AT&T, Verizon provide our communication platforms, but they don't do it on behalf of the government. They do it for themselves, and then they provide it to the US government. The US government doesn't direct them to share information with us. I mean, you have a few examples maybe where you have a FBI investigation, and it's very narrow. Conversely, military civil fusion in China means that their internet or cell phone or communication providers are working on behalf of the government and directed by the government how they operate. And that expands this whole range of industries, whether it's commercial aircraft, Boeing makes airplanes here that it sells to the US government, versus there with COMAC or AVIC, where they're directed to build this technology for the government, ultimately for military use, should it be designated by the Chinese, that happens to also sell commercially. And so we're seeing an inversion of that pyramid, and it ranges across biotechnology, AI, machine learning. And so I think that changes our relationship, or at least our understanding of commercial enterprises and companies and how they fit into this of, you're a commercial company, you're going to do whatever you're going to do, and the government will be a client who you will provide a service to versus you work at the behest of the government, which is what we're seeing with military civil fusion. And we're also seeing that expand down to the universities, the research labs, innovation ecosystems. So it's not just the loud, international companies you're used to. It's a whole range of people involved in military civil fusion. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. You had a graph at some point where you presented the way that foreign direct investment have evolved, and you showed that FDIs have decreased. It was on the graph from 2018 to 2019 when it comes from FDIs coming from Europe. You have any idea why perhaps that happened? Why this sudden decrease of foreign direct investments coming from Europe to US?
Yeah, there's quite a few economic theories on that, and I'm not married to any one. There's because liquidity is an all-time high in this period. There's a lot of cash flushing around. There should be a lot of foreign direct investment, but it's cyclical. So you're going to go through areas and ebbs and flows where there's a ton of money early into AI and machine learning. A lot of money gets placed. That market inflates, and so then investors are a little more speculative, waiting for kind of a second or third opportunity to get in there. Investment to the United States from China has also taken a trend line downward, whether that's because of our regulatory infrastructure, like things with CFIUS, or because of global trade wars, or just COVID or market movers. But it is cyclical. It will come back, and same with U.S. investment into Europe and our allies and partners too. You will see a whole range. Over.
Thank you. We have a questions from the audience, and then I'll come back with my final question as well.
David, it's Josh Bergen here.
Hey, Josh.
So I've got a question for you. This is a super fascinating presentation. I'm going to refer back to the same slide that Vlad did just a moment ago, the slide where you touched on VC investments between the US and China. In particular, there was one column down at the bottom of the slide that referred to oncology. And it prompted me to think of something, remember something about my home community of Tampa, Florida, where Moffitt Cancer Center had what was never quite clear in the press, but the Chinese had been involved in some exfiltration of information that Moffitt's research had been on cancer. Because much of this conversation centers around military technology, communications, intelligence gathering, et cetera, can you speak a bit more about the degree to which China is looking at medical research? And I would imagine that sort of the work they're doing would exceed that of just the borders of the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll keep my comments limited, just to say that they are pursuing it both for their own domestic cancer concerns, longevity, populous health provisions. They, like all countries, they want to provide for their people to live longer and happier, healthier lives. It is a global pursuit of theirs. If you type in investments, if you were to look at Chinese healthcare investments around the world, you would see that it's elevated everywhere. It's not specific to the US. It's anybody that plays in that game. And of course, virtually everybody does, because it's a leading area that's not well established, and it's a constant market mover. So comments, I'll keep them brief so I don't ever commit to say, though, this is one of those areas where I expect them to invest everywhere. And they will have a persistent presence there, for better or for worse, in all those domains. Over.
Okay, thank you. My question was also based on these VCs. It was actually a more basic question. I wanted to clarify to our audience, when you talk about VCs, you talk about the venture capital, right? That type of VCs that have increased from China to US. These being those type of investments in incipient, right? Companies with high risk, high reward, that type of, this is what you mean by those companies that China chooses to invest in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally venture capital, to your point, is focused on high risk, high reward. It's emerging tech. The area isn't well established. Private equity is more once it's well established, and they try to either privatize a public company and take it back private, or they try to grow it into an IPO or a public company. And then investment bankers and core banking financial institutions generally show up in that latter phase as well. So yeah, VC is more of a frontier or exploration capital designed very narrowly to target a segment or sector for huge growth opportunities. And yeah, VC is venture capital, exactly.
Great. And my final take on this would be about the take and replace strategy. I don't know if this is a correct question, as you kind of explain everything in the last part of your presentation with how companies can protect themselves. But so the question would be, how can take and replace strategies be stopped as long as US and European companies tend to still have a lot of production done in China?
The great question. Yes. I mean, we have an incredibly linked global economy. It's a great thing in many ways. A lot of efficiencies are recognized because of that. So I guess looking at countries or allies and partners to understand the threats that exist and be able to serve as capital providers to other companies. So if you have a company in Romania that makes a cool widget and they say, hey, we need to bring down our production costs. And right now, the only way we're seeing that is to go to China, where we understand that when we go there, we might have our technology taken from us. And actually China, just a few weeks ago, built out a framework for anti-lawsuit injunctions. So if you have an intellectual property theft claim in China, because your factory has technology stolen, you can no longer sue there if the courts so decide. So there's no recourse for you to recover that technology, that capital, or even those personnel there from an IP or from a litigation standpoint. So it's on Western countries and allies and partners to be able, with their excess capital right now, it's flowing around the market. There's $2 trillion roughly in loose cash to deploy in these spaces. That was what I read the other day. For us to offer alternatives for venture funds, for investment banks, for loan and debt structures, to be able to help keep those companies on shore, or to move to a cheaper production line where there's not the same risk of technology transfer and exploitation by adversaries. So it's very important that there's a strong dialogue within the EU, within the US, and within the commercial enterprise to understand that for the longevity of commercial cycles, it's very critical that we're able to deploy that loose capital, that emerging tech, while thinking about that protection that's necessary to ensure the longevity of it. Over.
That's all from me. Thank you very much. If there are any online questions or questions from our audience. If not, I would really like to thank you. I know we have a huge time difference between us, and you made an effort to join us today. Thank you very much for that. Your presentation was so insightful, and we'll hope to have you in our future conference as well. Thank you very much once again, and we'll see you as soon as possible, perhaps in a non-online environment when the pandemic ends. Thank you very much.
We look forward to being there in the future in person, and hopefully I'll be there with more of my state and defense colleagues.
Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can now move to our second keynote speaker from this plenary session, which is Mr. Silviu Nate. He's a security analyst specialized in geopolitics. He's an associate professor at the Department of International Relations, Political and Security Studies at the Social Science Faculty from Lucian Blaga University in Sibiu. He's also the director of the Global Studies Center at the same Lucian Blaga University. He's an author of numerous books and papers on the topics of security and geopolitics. Today, Mr. Nate will be addressing his speech on Russia's profile and its strategic game in the Black Sea. Mr. Nate, hello, nice to see you, and you have the floor, sir.
Hello, good morning in US and good afternoon in Romania. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
We hear you very well, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I might be off topic a little bit, but due to my international relations background and preoccupations, but my presentation will be focused on the specific implications of Russia's behavior and not too much on emerging technologies. So I hope you will find also interesting ideas from my side. So when it comes to profiling Russia's hegemony, we should take into account at least 5 variables. The military one, because the hegemon is the strongest military force globally or regionally. The second variable is related to the economic power of the actor. The third one is the political perspective. The fourth one is the institutional variable and institutional capacity. And the fifth one is the ideological factor. I will address to these 5 dimensions. And starting from this idea of hegemony, regional hegemony in the Black Sea, we must look also at the military capacity, which for such an actor must be superior to any other regional actor. Also, its system of alliances must be superior to any other military alliance. Regarding the distribution of power at the regional scale, the picture seems to be a little bit interesting in the Black Sea, which becomes an eloquent landmark for broader geopolitical dynamics. In this geopolitical equation, practically the military threat to the North and Central Atlantic region remains Russia. With maritime access from the Black Sea and through the Mediterranean Sea, Russia supplies and maintains the conflicts in Syria and Libya, trying to count on wider geopolitical stakes vis-a-vis Westerners and actors in MENA, in the Middle East and North Africa. We see that Russia is pushing for gaining geopolitical relevance in Syria and Libya, demonstrates its tactic faculty to jeopardize Western projections, whether they are stabilization, energy, or economic development. Declassified, I will go into history a little bit. Declassified analysis carried out by British strategists during the Cold War highlighted decisive role of the Black Sea and implicitly that of Turkey as a factor in preventing and limiting Russia's access from the mainland to the warm waters of the Mediterranean. Once there, in their opinion, Russia would have questioned the projections and security climate of Western Europe. Traveling in time, nowadays the Black Sea preserves its strategic relevance, and the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia becomes a desired outpost by Moscow in its wish to project strategic influence. Thus, the Black Sea is included in Russia's strategic vision as a regional platform for broader geopolitical developments and a space of instability, a veritable, I would say, gray area. Even though Montreux Convention is perceived as an important pillar for Turkey's maritime security. An extended perspective is also necessary from our point of view in order to support the relevance of the alliance. And here we have a kind of judgment. If Turkey cannot control the Black Sea, then it becomes less relevant for NATO. Currently, Turkey is an important actor and neighbor in the region and could initiate an innovative and creative strategy to integrate the NATO states in approaching the issues of the Black Sea. But for the moment, Turkey consciously or unconsciously supports the ground for the Black Sea to become a Russian military lake and not a NATO sea. So we are facing with this reality. From the economic point of view, at least in theory, the hegemon has the most developed economy, being a basic or indispensable partner for most other states. Russia does not have a highly developed economy, and by conducting large-scale raids outside this territory, it risks running out of financial resources too soon. which is counterproductive and contrary to Putin's desire to stay in power for many years to come. On the other hand, we cannot underestimate Russian capacity to endure strong international constraints and the capacity to recover herself. Consequently, by having a predominantly bichrome industrial landscape led by energy and arms export, Russia does not support the ability to profile itself as a hegemon or as a dominant economic power also in the region. From a political perspective, the third variable, the hegemon has a vast system of alliances, political partnerships and agreements with most states. Moscow's political connections occur mainly in relations with dictators and failed states, forcing internal political crisis and instability. I would say that Russia's vision of neighboring countries is more towards creating a political union. All these steps seems to be part of broader geopolitical projects that limit the aspiration of Ukraine, Georgia, and the Republic of Moldova to get closer to the democratic core of the Euro-Atlantic community. 2 days ago, we saw in the news that Gazprom proposed better terms for gas delivery in the Republic of Moldova, thus trying to condition the Moldavian government to give up its aspiration for European integration. So Kremlin's exercise confirms something interesting, that Nord Stream 2 actually is not a project with economic stakes, because the same amount of natural gas was provided in Europe through Ukraine before, and Nord Stream 2 is aimed to become a geopolitical tool. In this equation, I consider that the US and the allies must stand up and have a clear position towards Russia's behavior, being also a good argument to provide increased support for democratization process in the Republic of Moldova, since a pro-European liberal government is in position there. Regarding the fourth variable, institutional one, the hegemon and his allies control international institutions and impose the rules and mostly influence the rules that govern the world. This way, the hegemon is shaping the international agenda. Due to its economic strength, I would bring here into discussion China. China has the power to advance competing projects on a global scale, a profile that is not found in the case of Russia. But the Black Sea sits at the crossroad, and this is important. As suggested before, the economic power is an important vector for institutional multilateral games. From this perspective, Russia as a regional power becomes somehow dependent on China as an actor with multiple capacities. Although Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, its ability to structure the international agenda is limited precisely due to a weak system of allies and a precarious institutional system. And the last factor is the ideological one. The hegemon determines the main aspects of politics at the global or regional level, being a value indicator for others actors. Russia's domestic political model, the repressive actions of the authorities against political opponents and own citizens, are disapproved by liberal societies, being actually a non-model for aspirant states to the Euro-Atlantic society. Thus, Russian political behavior does not entirely deny the Soviet ideological heritage. A lesson learned from the World War II shows us that increased economic instability and the absence of a dominant power capable of stabilizing the international system led to escalation. Yesterday, I saw in the Congress hearings on the Black Sea security that invited experts commonly admitted that only if the US will assume a leading comprehensive policy in the Black Sea, the balance of power will ensure the stabilization process. And some conclusions. As we already accustomed to, the Kremlin mixes political goals with military ones. It makes a military move and then contextually analyzes new offensive opportunities, as well as what political gains it could accumulate from these actions. Russia's ethos is the saying, push, and if there is no resistance, push more. And if there is resistance, push elsewhere. Its tactical and strategic components are important and not negligible when we refer to Russian-style modus operandi. There is also a psychological effect of the latest military developments in Eastern Ukraine, Sea of Azov and Crimea. Is used by Russia for the purpose of intimidation. For Moscow, the military show up in the Black Sea is effectively a blackmailing instrument against the Western powers in the hope of gaining a place at the table of global stakes. In my opinion, these attempts indicate Russia's effort to claim a status of global power. From the ideological institutional point of view, we have another phenomenon. Russia and China combined are aimed to develop a parallel multilateral organizations. This new institutional framework might lead on a long run on contested multilateralism, a concept developed by Julia Morse and Robert Keohane, who describe this approach as a pattern to challenge the rules, practices, or missions of existing multilateral institutions already founded on liberal values. Anyway, the evidence of Russia's hegemonic decline and struggle to maintain its strategic relevance generate an increased aggressive behavior in the Black Sea. And we are forced now to identify solutions and recommendations. First, membership action plan and the membership action plan for NATO, for Georgia and Ukraine might not work at this stage, but an approach for a stronger partnership on democratization and capacity building, taking in consider the economic factor, institutional and military, would support the transition for starting the membership action plan in the future. Otherwise, and I will justify my idea, I will motivate it. Otherwise, it's more probable that Russia will restart its conquest games of annexations and occupations in the region. The second idea, or my second recommendation, supporting interconnectivity between the Baltic and the Black Sea under the Three Seas initiative by infrastructure, rail, roads, digital, and airspace would contribute to sustainable development of the region and bring closer states to Western efforts like Ukraine and Moldova, because they are in the proximity, in the regional, in the geographic proximity. Only by engaging a comprehensive strategy, we'll be able to disconnect these disadvantageous interdependencies where Russia is capable of operating in gray areas, basically shattering the societal resilience and as the foundation of state sovereignty. And here we have a lot of examples in the recent history. Also, we need to reaffirm the alliance permanent presence and permanent deterrence in the Black Sea, and must be a key engagement pillar by supporting rotational air policing missions and military naval forces, including here cyber and intelligence. Following the principle of strengthening political, economic, institutional, and military capacity would create the prerequisites for the Black Sea coastal states and the eastern flank allies to achieve a new status capable of coercive diplomacy. This would be something new in time, a coercive diplomacy, a regional coercive diplomacy towards Russia, but also getting a pivotal role of the alliance's eastern flank. And I have also 2 points in mind. Due to European Union fragmentations and different strategic views on Eastern neighborhood and the Black Sea region, a successful strategy at the Black Sea is possible only under the US leadership and US commitment to become a Black Sea power. Because here it's an irony that the US is strategically controlling the planetary ocean, but not the Black Sea in terms of maritime power. And my last point is that Romania is a predictable ally, has the proper profile to become a hub for regional awareness, evaluation of hybrid threats, and understanding the Russian tactical and strategic pattern in the Black Sea. Thank you.
Thank you as well for your presentation. And what I would like to ask as a first question, you basically mentioned two big players in the Black Sea area. One of which is Russia, of course, the second being Turkey. And at some point you mentioned the Monroe Convention, and I wanted to ask, perhaps it's now a cliche question already, but it's a good question, I do believe. With the new Istanbul Canal being developed, a canal that is supposed to bypass all the European part of Istanbul, and here comes the cliche question, do you think that this is a way of actually, I don't know, canceling the Monroe Convention that Turkey can do?
This might be ground for future discussions because Turkey sees the Montreux Convention as a main pillar of its maritime security. And we must ask Turkey what they want and what Turkey is, what is acceptable for Turkey. There is also another variable that we should take into discussion here. Maybe the US should look closer to repair the relation with Turkey, because some differences and the divergences started when Turkey was strongly disappointed of non-accessing the Patriot system, but the Allies used Patriot system in Turkey during the different wars in the Middle East. Also, Turkey is out of the F-35 program. On the other hand, there are some issues that we can address, but regarding your point on Istanbul Canal, here we don't have actually enough information and enough conceptual approach to understand how the Turkey leadership sees the way this canal should be governed. And might be an overpass, a navigation overpass, but which might exclude in a way, or might be an alternative to Montreux Convention. But there is a lot of pressure from Moscow on the Turkish leadership not to develop this canal, because Russia sees this alternative as a threat to its status quo in the Black Sea. Therefore, we must start a debate, at least at the regional level, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, and why not all coastal states at the Black Sea. But under, of course, also US should address some issues to repair the relation with Turkey, in my opinion, because we don't see too much change or too much involvement on repairing the relations or finding a compromise. And we didn't see for a long time, also during the Republican mandate and also now. So there are a lot of questions still. We are still facing with a lot of questions now.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from one of our course participants from, I think, if I understand correctly, the question would be if we can now refer to a new system, an Asian system with Russia inside it, perhaps that Euro-Asian system that has been discussed so much that Russia desires.
China is also present in the region, is not a major investor for the moment, but is working to develop a strong economic partnership with Turkey. And there are also concerns about how China views the future of Istanbul Canal and also the relation, economic and strategic relation with Turkey. There are some investments. Maybe you know that China gave $1 billion to Turkey for different investments, also in the airfield near Istanbul. And of course, the projection of China is to push, because China has the financial capacity to support the implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative. In this equation, we have an alternative. We have the Three Seas Initiative, which is an overlaid project on the 16+1 initiative promoted by China in the Eastern Europe. And in the Black Sea, of course, there must be somehow must be an awareness to prevent China to get closer in the region. Why? Because we see that China is a major investor and is also a big player in the naval ports in Europe. China bought Piraeus port, is also a big player in Rotterdam, and so on. And China also is the controller, monitors and control the supply chains by the sea. I think from Asia to Europe in a proportion of 70%. And now we must see what is our interest and our position in NATO and regarding the US strategic partnership and the intention of Russia and China in the region. I don't know if I understood correctly the question. There is in Turkey, there is also, there are two sides of thinking. Some of the analysts and thinkers are going to Western values, and some of them, also generals in the Turkish army, are embracing this Euro-Asian values. And we are a little bit afraid of decoupling Turkey from the alliance, but Romania and Bulgaria is not enough to keep Turkey in the boat, in the alliance's boat, and structure together a strategy for the Black Sea. So we need NATO and the US for that.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. If there are any other questions. Okay, if not, I think we can conclude this second plenary session. I'd like to once again thank our keynote speaker, Mr. Silviu Nate, for joining us today and delivering this speech that completes, let's say, a day where we have had two presentations that have shown some of the risks and threats on the eastern flank. As I mentioned earlier, from Andrei Sobon, we saw the perspective of the northern part, and now we have the perspective on the southern part. With that, I would like to also conclude today's activities in our conference. However, I would like to mention to all our guests, both physical and especially our online guests who enter the conference using the link, that tomorrow morning, please use the same Zoom link as you have used today to join with us at 10 o'clock for our third plenary session, which will be on the topic of cybersecurity and the European Union vision on emerging technologies and their impact on defense and building military capabilities. We have 3 keynote speakers, starting with Brigadier General Anton Rog, the Director of the National Cyber Center, Brigadier General Jean-François Ripoche, the Director Research and for Technology and Innovation from the European Defense Agency, and former Minister Professor Ioan Mircea Pașcu, who you have already met today. We'll conclude with that tomorrow. We still have an ongoing panel session. We had to adapt to all of these restrictions, and we closed one of the panel sessions earlier today in order to get back to this plenary session. We'll finish and wrap it up tomorrow once the plenary session is over. Okay, so we'll wrap it up then. All of this, of course, will happen tomorrow starting with 10. Use, please, that Zoom link that you have used to join us today for the entire conference. Thank you very much, all of you, for attending. Have a good afternoon. See you tomorrow morning.
Thank you. See ya.